Hey guys, it's Cobalt here. At this point, it should be no surprise that I am a toy customizer, and because of that, I frequently get asked, how do I do it? In honor of 5,000 subscribers, I figured it was finally time to announce my new tutorial series where I teach you guys tips and tricks of customizing LPS. While I specialize in painting Littlest Pet Shops, all of these techniques can be applied to other toy and figure customization. In this first installment, I'll be covering the basics of everything you need to know to get started, but later on, I will create more in-depth tutorials upon request. Off to the side of the screen, you'll see all the topics I'll be discussing in this video along with the relative timestamps to skip to each one. Alright, without further ado, let's get started. The most important materials for any customization projects are of course your paint and brushes. You don't need to break the bank to start painting. While model paints may seem ideal, inexpensive craft store acrylics are a great alternative. The main brand I use is called Handmade Modern, but I've also worked with Folk Art in the past. Each of these paint brands range from around 99 cents to $4 depending on where you buy from. As for brushes, I don't use any one specific brand, but soft brushes are ideal. The main brushes I use are wide flat brushes and thin round brushes. Now that you have your paint and brushes, it's time to prepare your figure. When it comes to Littlest Pet Shop figures, you can use a normal LPS, one with the factory paint removed, or a blank base. Personally, I don't bother to remove the original factory paint, but if you choose to do this step, make sure to use acetone in a well-ventilated area. No matter what your base figure looks like, you always want to start off by dry brushing it white. Even if you're using a blank base that is already white, this first coat will help with the application of future coats. Start off by taking a wide flat brush and getting it a little damp, but not drippy. Once your brush is ready, dip it into the paint and wipe off the excess. Then, quickly apply the paint evenly across the surface. This will be the basis for the rest of the coat, so make sure there are no lumps or noticeable brush strokes. Unless your base coat is going to be white, this does not need to be a solid application. Now it's time for the actual base coat. Choose your color and get your brush wet. Next, mix a bit of water into the paint of your choice and begin the application. Watering down your paint results in the smoothest application with little to no brush strokes. However, when too much water is used, the coat can become drippy or contain air bubbles. It can sometimes seem like I use too much water when applying my base coats, but it's simply a matter of finding a ratio that works best for you. Continue this process until your entire figure is coated with an opaque layer of paint. Once your base is complete, you can begin adding your details following the same steps. However, I recommend using less water and switching to a small flat brush or round thin brush. Now that your base coat and details of your custom are complete, it's time to move on to the eyes. The eyes are the most important part of the custom in my opinion, but also the most difficult for beginners. For the purpose of this tutorial, I'll be showing you how to create a very simple eye, but there are hundreds of unique styles out there, and in the future I can create a more in-depth tutorial. For this step, you're going to need your thinnest round brush and the color you've chosen for your eyes, along with black and white. Begin by taking your white paint and coating the area inside the eyes until opaque. After all coats are dry, take your eye color and paint a circle inside the white shape. Keep in mind to make this shape as circular as possible, but if you have trouble, use an authentic LPS for reference. You can also take a darker or lighter version of this color and mix it in to create depth. Once the shape is completely dry, take your black paint and create a smaller circle on top of the color. Now, make sure the black shape is completely dry because this next step is the most difficult. Dip your thinnest brush into your black paint and wipe off the excess. Next, trace the outline at the top of the eye shape, trying to use only one or two motions. If you mess up this step, simply take water and wash it away with a clean brush. If your paint is still wet, clean water acts as an eraser. Next, take your white paint and add on the white dots however you see fit for the eye shine. Finally, return to your various colors and clean up the custom as needed. The final step of the customization process is a coat of sealant. This step is not required, but it can help protect your art and add another layer of smoothness, especially if the brand of paint you're choosing to use dries rough. For this final step, you're going to need a matte and glossy sealant. Make sure not to use a gloss sealant on the entire custom. Start by dipping your brush into water and then into the chosen sealant. Quickly coat the entire custom similarly to the base coating process. Again, adding water reduces brush strokes, but make sure not to add too much. Once the matte sealant is completely dry, add a gloss sealant to the eyes and any other areas you find necessary. Adding the shine to the eyes brings more life to the figure, and once everything is dry, your custom is complete. If you want to go the extra step to make your custom as unique as possible, adding sculpted parts is the way to go. The process of using clay is actually the first step to the customizing process, but I saved it for last as it is not required and can often seem intimidating for beginners. Because LPS are made of plastic, I do not recommend using bakeable clay. I have made a custom with Sculpey baking clay in the past, but you have to watch carefully to ensure that the original plastic does not melt. The most ideal type of clay for figures is air dry clay. While you don't need to spend a lot of money on paint, clay is often the most expensive. 2-part epoxy-based clay is often the way to go and will not crack in the drying process like cheaper air-dry clays. The 2 types of clay I use are called Kneadatite, aka green stuff, and Epoxy Sculpt. Both are 2-part epoxy clays, meaning that both colors must be mixed together before sculpting. Kneadatite comes with a blue and yellow component. Make sure to take equal parts and remember that a little goes a long way. Once thoroughly mixed, the clay will turn green. Epoxy Sculpt shares similar properties, with one component being white and the other gray. Once mixed together, the clay will be a light gray. Mixing the 2 parts initiates the drying process, but there is no need to work fast because they both take several hours to dry completely and can be activated with water throughout the sculpting process. Personally, I prefer Kneadatite for its elastic quality, especially when sculpting hair and clothes. Epoxy Sculpt, on the other hand, isn't as stretchy and is easier to rip apart. Epoxy Sculpt also has several drying stages after the initial mixture and can dry faster or slower depending on the temperature you work in. Epoxy Sculpt is also easier to smooth out for beginners, but I still recommend using sandpaper in a well-ventilated area after dry to remove lumps and fingerprints. For bigger projects, I also recommend constructing an armature out of wire or tinfoil to give the sculpt more stability. Now you have everything you need to know to get started on your customizing journey. As I mentioned earlier, I will be creating more in-depth painting and sculpting tutorials in the future, so let me know in the comments what you would like to see next. Once again, thank you guys so much for over 5,000 subscribers, and I will see you all in my next video. Bye!